In just the year 2023 alone, over 1,107 brand new Magic cards were printed and released to the public. For a little bit of context, that's about as many brand new Magic cards as were printed in the first 3 years of Magic combined. It was around 1,300 cards, in case you're interested. Now, with more new cards every single year, it seems like, it can be tough to even play with half of them, let alone pick a list of the ones you like the most. But even though I didn't get to play with every new card that was released this year, who did? I did get to put together a list of cards that I had some really good times with. That's what we're going to do today, a little list of my favorite cards from 2023.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Like and subscribe for the couch. Don't you want more couch videos? Just like it's the old days. Grab yourself a Pepperidge Farm cookie and a Werther's Original and a big bowl of Bluebell homemade ice cream. And sit out with Deb on the old-fashioned wood country porch that looks suspiciously like a couch. Hey, how come all the products that market themselves on like nostalgic, I don't know, Norman Rockwell, like Americana or whatever, how come they're all sweets? Kind of a weird observation. I'm just noticing it as I say it. Not what the video is about, but there's probably something there. No, what this video is about instead is my favorite cards from the year. Not the top 10 best cards from 2023. I think a lot of people are going to be doing that, and that's going to get a little redundant. If I was going to do it, I would probably just go with the meme and make like all 10 slots Orcish Bowmasters, except for like number 3 is the One Ring or something like that, right? So again, I think it's going to get a little bit old watching best cards of 2023 lists, so I'm going to do something slightly different and just talk about 10 cards that I had a lot of personal enjoyment with, some stories with over the year, or even some cards that I just really like the design of for whatever reason. So let's strap in and talk about 10 cards that I like from this year. Now, my number 10 kind of feels like an honorable mention, but I just had to have Poison Dart Frog on this list somewhere. Just such a beautiful and simple card. Like I was saying just a second ago towards the top, I like cards that look like they could have been designed in like the late 90s, but we just got them this year. Like they help to prove, and this certainly does, that simple yet effective design is still available on Magic cards in 2023 and beyond. I think when a lot of people make their favorite cards of this year lists, PDF is going to end up in a lot of their files, but terrible jokes aside, this card is a scourge in draft and is really great in cube for what that's worth. It just really bolsters any limited experience with its very presence. Just an awesome little card that didn't go too overboard in terms of design or anything, and that's kind of the thing I like the most about it. But with that, let's hop to number 9, which is the only card on the entire list that is not available in a standard playable set. So place your bets right now. It is from Lord of the Rings. I imagine a lot of people making this list for themselves are probably going to have a bunch of cards from Lord of the Rings on it. I've seen a lot of high praise for that set, and I've had a lot of high praise for that set. And I think it was really well done, well designed, especially a lot of the legendary characters do what they feel like they should do. But that said, my favorite quote-unquote card from the set, not even a legendary character, it's just Mirkwood Bats. Yeah, speaking of cards that are sort of beautiful in their simplicity design-wise, this is way up there on my list from this year, and I've had a lot of fun with it even though I haven't ever played it on Magic Arena. It's one of the only cards on the list that I have never actually resolved in the digital client, but that said, I have played a couple of Commander games with this. It's great in Prosper Tomebound, I've got it in my Judith deck, I've got it in my LSL Core deck. It turns out that in decks where you make a bunch of tokens or a bunch of treasures or whatever, the card is just always going to be good. Even if you don't sacrifice them tokens, it's still okay. It just procs when you create tokens, which is kind of all I really wanted in the first place. But you can bet in LSL Core and Judith and Prosper, I am sacking tokens, especially treasures in Prosper. So I've had a lot of fun with this card this year, and I don't really plan on stopping anytime soon. You can't make me. Number 8 is a card that I didn't really expect to be on this list when I started this thing, or at least it's not one of the cards that like jumped immediately to my mind. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Urabrass Forge has to be on this list. Hear me out. We have had a lot of exciting adventures together this year, and it just keeps popping up in decks that I make. You never leave home without it. If you play red, at least in my experience, I mean, mono red doesn't have to play this or anything, but basically any other deck with mountains that I built all year has played Urabrass Forge, right? Whether it's the big red list or maybe mono red artifacts list, red-white artifacts list. I built red-white decks that have a bunch of sweepers in them and stuff and just play like Urabrass Forge and other token makers and stuff to make sure you can keep stuff on the board. And just Sunfall or depopulate like every other turn or whatever, it doesn't matter. Those decks are really fun, and that's like 3 or 4 different decks, whether the artifact decks are more more aggro focused. Sometimes you'll play Forge in those. Sometimes, again, those artifact decks are more control focused and play sweepers. You still play Forge in those. I've just found a reason to play Urabrass Forge in like, I don't know, a dozen decks this year, so I think it's earned its spot on this list. Now, number 7 is another artifact that makes tokens and shows up in those same like Boros sweepers lists and stuff, especially the more artifact-centric ones. It's Thousand Moon Smithy. Yeah, I know this card is like kind of brand new, but I've already played like, I don't know, like 300 games with different decks in this card, and I've tried probably 20 different builds with this card, trying to find the ones that's not only the best, but the ones that I think are the most fun, because I just think that Thousand Moon Smithy is a really, really fun card to resolve and keep on the table, whether it gets flipped or not. It's fun one way or the other. But honestly, I've already gushed for a pretty long time in a fairly recent video about this card, so I'm not going to talk about it for too long here. Just know that we've already had a few journeys together, and we have very, very many more in our future. Now, for number 6, I decided that I wanted a Planeswalker somewhere on this list, because I've had a lot of fun with Planeswalkers this year, but I really wanted to narrow it down to just one. I decided to go with not necessarily the Planeswalker I've resolved the most or protected the most over the last year, but again, the one that I actually think I've had the most fun not only playing with, but building decks around. And it's Kaya Intangible Slayer. Okay, yeah, it's getting a few points just for being Orzhov, because it's me we're talking about. And honestly, it's getting a few points for being Kaya, too, just because I think Kaya is really cool. But aside from all that stuff, I just really like the design on this card, too. It's a 7-mana Planeswalker, right? But obviously, it's control-oriented. Hopefully, you get to the point in the game where you can resolve this by paying full price for it. But if you don't want to do that, I've probably reanimated this more times than I've actually cast it. And once she's on the table, boy, does that pendulum swing. There's not a whole lot of cards that can turn the momentum of a game of Magic in your favor right now in Standard. Like Kaya, right? Once she's on the table, all you have to really do is plus her and dare your opponent to kind of do something about the gathering loyalty on her, or you can just like blow stuff up. She just does everything, and hopefully you've been able to either keep the board clear or cultivate a side of the board that's able to protect her and block for her and stuff. Just a lot of situations, once you get the Kaya out, the game becomes all about doing something about that Kaya, and your opponent can't really help that, and I kind of love that. Now we're halfway down the list. For number 5, let's talk about Virtue of Persistence for just a second. I wanted one of the virtues to be on this list, and it was honestly almost the red one. I've had a lot of fun with that one too, and the white one is obviously really powerful, shows up in a lot of decks, but the fun meter has almost been broken with Virtue of Persistence, mostly because the use case meter is so high on this card, right? I'm not going to pretend it's not a really, really powerful card. Not every card on the list is, but this one certainly is. If we are talking about 7-mana cards you can play in black, this is probably just way better than Kaya, right? But it's also a 2-mana card you can play in black, and you can't really say that about Kaya either. Once you cast this as a removal spell, your opponent has no choice but to just kind of sit there and look at it and not do anything about it. It's sitting in exile. They can't make you discard it. They know about it, but all they can do is watch helplessly as you play your 7th mana and resolve a Virtue of Persistence and just start reanimating stuff literally every turn. The card is bonkers and kind of unfair once resolved. Really, this is probably in a lot of ways the single most powerful card on this entire list, but being a little too powerful, in air quotes, isn't going to keep you off this list either. I've had way too much fun with this card this year. Now, speaking of Wilds of Eldraine, our next few entries are going to be from that set, so buckle in, because for number 4, we're going to talk for just a second about Ariette of the Charmed Apple. Now, I'm not going to freak out too much about this because I already fangirled over it for like 5 whole minutes in our last video, our top 10 favorite commanders of all time. Look in the description. There's a link to that video if you're interested. But because of that, most of you have already seen me talk about this card for a good long time and all the stuff I've done with it over this year. So again, I'm not going to go too in-depth on it other than to say this is just another card I really, really like the design of. I love Enchantress stuff. Again, I like Orzhov, but there's also the flavor of the card, which is on point. The art is great. If you haven't actually looked in the mirror that's in her collar yet, do yourself a favor and do that. Just really, really sweet art direction on the card too. So just about everything about the card is sweet. It's a really, really cheap commander to cast for the most part. I kind of like that. 3 mana is not too expensive. So a lot you can do with it. And I think most importantly, causes you to look at cards in your collection in a different way. And I really like when any card does that. Now we're in the top 3 here, and you know that Sir Ginger is going to be on my list somewhere. At least I assume, if you know me well enough, that you do. I built a bunch of decks with this card too. You know, I was already building a sort of artifact aggro deck that's performing really well like every season since the Brothers War came out. I've been building this deck, and I've really been liking it, but it just got super overpowered with the release of Sir Ginger. There's only a couple of copies in the deck, but she is freaking phenomenal, right? And just about any commander deck that cares about cracking eggs and putting artifacts in the graveyard, just those are the same thing, are gonna play Sir Ginger, right? She gets really huge in those situations, and there's turns in Commander where she goes from that 3-1 to like a 15-14 over the course of one turn because of all the stupid crap you're doing. So she's broken in that format, but she also has a lot to do in Standard, and I just like the fact that she's a food. You know, I haven't even talked about her like super special mode against Planeswalkers yet or anything like that. Just, you know, the fact that she's a 2-mana 3-1 that any deck in the world can play. And if a bunch of artifacts are getting popped, she just gets bigger and bigger. Like, everything about the card is sweet. She can't die to go for the throat. Just like, awesome thing. And yes, this is the one time I can call a card sweet and it's a pun. So I guess I like that about her too. Now, number 2, I think more than any other card on this list, is here because it is simple and elegant in its design. I like beauty and I like simplicity. And again, just one more time, I like when cards look like they should have been printed in like Stronghold. We just didn't get them until now, right? And I think that Regal Bunnycorn fits the bill, again, more than any card we got in Standard all year. I know it's a vanilla guy. I think some people are going to be kind of bored by Regal Bunnycorn. It doesn't actually do that much, but again, I really like when we get cards that feel like they should have been part of the Magic iconography for the last 3 decades, but they're just kind of like waiting to be born, an artifact waiting to be uncovered, dusted off, and designed. And this is what we finally got. I mean, it's not literally an artifact. I was making a metaphor there, but still, just like an archaeologist, a good Magic designer will dig up a card that should have existed this entire time and finally make it real. And they actually were able to pull that off with, again, I think more than any other card all year, Regal Bunnycorn. Just an amazing, but yet simple design. It can get very big very fast. I mean, it's a 5/5 on turn 3 a lot of the time, so the fact that it's vanilla kind of doesn't really make that big of a difference, but still, even though it's vanilla and will bore some people, it was still easily one of my favorite designs of the entire year. Again, one more time, cards that prove that there is still simple yet effective and in some cases competitive design space still available on Magic cards, I'm always going to love. Not every card has to have a text box a mile long or anything like that to be viable. But what could possibly be my number 1 card of 2023? Place your bets and make your wagers, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you are about to make a lot of money on this because the smart easy money is on Bart. And if you picked Bart, you're 100% correct. Yeah, I know. This is in the most recent Magic set that came out as I record this video. I also don't care. Just like Thousand Moon Smithy, I know, even more so with this card, that he and I will walk hand in hand into a bright future, head held high, peering into a beautiful bright sky. Or whatever. More than any other card this whole year, this is the one that I feel like I've been waiting my entire life for, or at least as long as I've been an Aristocrats player, which is 2013, something like that. It's been about 10 years, a full decade I've been waiting for this card to exist. A 2-mana free sack outlet baby that can sack artifacts and creatures. That's 2 different things, and you got a lot of artifacts laying around, especially if you're making like treasures or whatever kind of random token. There's a bunch of them at this point. That's Standard or Commander I'm talking about. Oh, and also it gets counters instead of it being like until end of turn or something like that. It's just a Boffo card. I'm going to resurrect the term Boffo for this card. We need better adjectives to describe cool things. Either way, Bartholomew del Presidio, just easily, far and away. I mean, like probably 10 steps above Regal Bunnycorn for my number 1 card of the year, mostly because I know that we're going to have a lot of incredible times together. But that's it, Ski Lewitsky. That is my top 10 cards of 2023. I guess if you want a little bonus content, sort of an honorable mention because I didn't do one yet, my favorite set of the year. What's the best set of the entire year? I think a lot of people, again, would say Lord of the Rings. And recency bias, I think, would probably dictate LCI. It was a really good set, but all things considered, I think Wilds of Eldraine was my favorite set of the year. I really like Eldraine as a setting, and again, I think they knocked it out of the park this time. There's a lot of really good design, a lot of fantastic flavor too, which I think matters a lot in terms of mini Magic sets. Again, just in terms of like how much fun I've had playing with the cards, how much I like the flavor, how much I like the draft environment too comes into all this. ultimately the mechanics and, different cycles and stuff like that. Again, I think Wilds of Eldraine was just a knockout. Easily the best set of the year for me, at least. But yeah, that's actually Allski Kowalski. So just do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Like the videos, subscribe again if you're new and you want a bunch of content. We've got all kinds of stuff for 2024 coming up, including predictions and things I want for 2024 and, all the universes beyond. I think I could actually stomach. I can't wait to put that video out. It's going to be so bad. But either way, there's a lot of stuff coming out. Subscribe for that content. Of course, let me know. I'm really actually interested what your favorite cards, not necessarily what you think the best, most competitive cards were this year, but your favorite cards from the year that you have stories with, experiences with. Remember when we used to have that? Before we had a digital client, we used to have stories with cards that connected us to them. If you have those with any cards from this year, share them in the comments section. I'm always interested to know what you think about stuff like this especially. Aside from all that, if you really want to help out around here, you could always support on Patreon if you got some extra Christmas scratch, right? It's just $1 a month to get started. And for that $1 a month, you get to vote on what videos we even do around here in the first place. So if you do consider doing that, I really appreciate it. And I do want to take a second. If you've been supporting on Patreon this year, I just want to say that I sincerely, profusely thank you so much for that, because I couldn't do it, literally could not do it without the Patreon folks. So I really want to continue doing this. So if you've supported all year, thank you so much. And if you continue to support throughout 2024, I can't thank you enough, because I want to do this as long as I possibly can. And there is absolutely no way I could do it without the Patreon crowd. So thank you, thank you, thank you. But, if you don't have that kind of cash just laying around, that's fine. I just appreciate that you're still here watching the videos. That means an awful lot to me too. But I guess that's about all I've actually got for this one. Do I have any more Itski Lewitsky, Allski Kowalski, Dunzo for this onezo? I think that's the one I should employ here. So I am Dunzo for this onezo, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.